the way you would draw the line on that structure is to bifurcate the work, as you said as well, and look at what work only you can do. You must be the best in the world at. It's highly core competency. It's related to your competitive advantage. And it's something that is really important that you invest in. And that kind of work, you need that onshore. You need it insourced. It's product work. It's strategy around, your customer engagement. It's your relationship with sales. All of those things need to be what you do internally. And then look at the rest of the work that actually you don't want to be unique. You want to be best in the world. You want to be efficient.
Welcome to Outsource to Profits. This is Jamie Shanks with an incredible guest that I started this agency. Basically, a seedling was put into my mind back in 2018 that germinated. I couldn't get it out of my mind, and I started a like-minded business. Domenic, please introduce yourself, and then we'll frame the topic of the week.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Jamie. Domenic Colasante. I'm the founder and CEO of 2X. We are a marketing as a service firm. I'm sure we'll talk more about that. Think of us like a managed services firm for B2B marketing. I'm a former CMO by background, so I've lived my whole career in the CMO chair, mostly in the tech industry, and founded 2X to be the marketing service firm I always wanted to buy from that really didn't exist. And so we've had a really interesting journey, just hitting 1,000 employees now. Business is only about 6 years old. And I think we're doing something very unique in the marketing space.
This is fantastic. I think years ago, Matt Hines introduced us. And long and the short, back in 2018, I had a bloated onshore North American marketing team in a small agency that had an $800,000+ budget. And our cost of customer acquisition and payback period swelled from measuring it in months to what felt like years. And it wasn't until I took on mentorship that somebody taught me to look at the denominator and help me understand that if I saved $1 on a 20% EBITDA business, that's the equivalent of not having to chase $5 in net new revenue to make that same profitability. And that was my very beginnings of offshoring, where I started with a teammate in the Philippines and eventually started having teammates all around the place. All around the world, and then now have created an agency out of Dhaka, Bangladesh. But I want to explore for you, with you together, what is the main objection? What is the core challenge to where a CMO doesn't understand the difference between the strategy work and the tactical work, and where they need to be completely bifurcated when it comes to return on investment, return on value, and where using leverage allows marketing budgets to go 3 to 5 times further. You're saying 2 times. I think it's even further than that, especially when you power up your offshore team with AI. So can you unpack that for a CMO?
Well, I think it's 2X the impact and 2X the volume of capacity at the same time. And so it's an exponential increase. I think it's the biggest hurdle, I think, is lack of experience with high quality offshore. I think a lot of marketers tend to have had negative experiences because offshoring has been done wrong so much more often than it's been done right. In countries with poor English proficiency, in areas that are extremely task-based but not enough entrepreneurial thinking, or a labor force really focused on the equivalent importance of creativity and science together. And so I think a lot of it comes from just never having seen it done well. And I also think that as you look at the functions in the business, most functions, IT, finance and accounting, procurement, HR, are huge users of offshoring and shared services and leverage. Marketing tends to insource a lot. When we do, as marketers, outsource, we tend to send it to a higher cost firm, an agency sometimes. And so we just haven't had a lot of experience. It is. And I think so some of it is just a lack of awareness and appreciation for businesses that exist now that have actually completely changed the paradigm of what offshoring is, that have built businesses in Southeast Asia, where there's tremendous English proficiency, that have focused on markets that have an equal balance of art and science, which is really important to our core marketing challenge today, and have also proven, our firm's 1,000 people, so we've proven that this works. And it's we have 110% net revenue retention. This isn't something you keep if it's not extremely high quality. And so I think it's almost in the last couple of years, there's been this new wave of marketing service provider that's very different, very unique, and learning a little bit about them would be my number one piece of advice, of just being open to the idea and trying to explore, what do those firms know that I don't, or what are their customers who really are my competitors? What do they know that I don't? And how are they getting leverage out of marketing? And how might I stretch my budget and impact much further than I can via traditional models?
So you started the agency out of Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and you've scaled it dramatically there. If I recall, recently read an article that you're now expanding to other geo centers. Number one, is that true? Number two, what is the reason to open up offices in other geolocations to serve your customers?
Yeah, we are expanding. We acquired a business in the Philippines last Q4. So now we have 2 centers. Some reasons, one, it's a little easier to scale when you have more centers. As we've been in sort of hyper growth, almost 100% year-over-year growth. Having more recruiting functions, more places to put people makes it a little bit easier to balance some of that. Also, what's important to us was to be able to support different time zones. And so for a long time, our Kuala Lumpur center primarily worked overnight for US hours, which is a huge advantage in the speed of, you send something over at 5 p.m. Eastern and you wake up tomorrow, it's done. But not all marketing work is like that. Some work you need, during the workday. And the Philippines, as you know, in particular, very common to have resources working during the US workday there. And I think there's also a little bit of difference in skills. While there's, in our world, it's all in the B2B space. Certain geos have higher densities of development talent, or UI UX talent, or writing talent, or MarTech talent. And so being able to kind of go to where the talent is and bring in the best people in the world. We have 2 centers today. We are working on a few others, looking at both, organic development as well as inorganic. I think some firms have built this capability well and have gotten to a good amount of size, but they don't have the US presence and the US momentum. And so snapping those 2 things together is also really good for some of those teams. And so fast forward a couple of years, you'll see us with 6 centers around the world.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Let's pretend the audience member is a CMO. I noticed that you serve the global enterprise, global mid-market. Primarily, a lot of your customers are larger businesses. Now, you have an audience member listening to this right now, and there's a Gartner research document that just came out that showed the percentage of revenue to marketing spend spiked up just until COVID, fell off a cliff, and then it reset itself to a mark that is even a little bit below pre-COVID and has precipitously dropped over the last couple of years. I think it's now 7.7 or might even be the 6% of revenue is given to marketing. So now you've got to, and the article from Gartner was do more with less. I just recorded a podcast with a marketing agency that runs a model where they have 1 onshore strategist to 3 offshore tacticians. Maybe get tactile. How would you coach that CMO to recognize the mindset of why they need to do this, and then tactically what they should think about setting up their team where their onshore, and I call it $500 an hour value creation, their onshore team might do ideation, but the pull through of everything else it makes absolutely no financial sense for the pull through to be done onshore. But any comments, thoughts? Take it wherever you'd like.
Yeah, that's a real problem. And we call that the marketing resource paradox that's driving that, which is every year budget goes down or stays flat and impact expectations go up. And you can't solve that via incremental thinking. You have to innovate on the organizational model and the structure. And the point that you brought up about having an onshore strategist and then a team of tactical experts, leverage, I think about it as the way you would draw the line on that structure is to bifurcate the work, as you said as well, and look at what work only you can do. You must be the best in the world at. It's highly core competency. It's related to your competitive advantage. And it's something that is really important that you invest in. And that kind of work, you need that onshore. You need it insourced. It's product work. It's strategy around, your customer engagement. It's your relationship with sales. All of those things need to be what you do internally. And then look at the rest of the work that actually you don't want to be unique. You want to be best in the world. You want to be efficient. You want to be standardized. You want to be scalable. That work is work that you should outsource. It's work that you should have done by someone else. And when you start to think about all marketing work in those two dimensions, is it strategic core competency, I must be best in the world at and unique? Or is it, I want to standardize best practice, efficient scale, email campaigns, tech management, creating content, atomizing programs, building dashboards, navigating, project management events, all that, more than half the work falls into that other bucket. And so when you see it that way, then how do I get, the greatest scale, the lowest cost, the most efficiency out of it? It causes you to think that way. And I think in that dimension, marketers are just starting to get to a point where they have to change. Like they're being asked to, navigate organizational restructuring. They're being asked to turn off a whole bunch of tech that they bought that they're not fully using. Like they have to do something different. And so innovating on the headcount, the operating model, the org chart is really a way to get not just more resourcing for less money, it also gives you a huge amount of flexibility that marketers have never had. The whole org is mostly a big block of fixed cost. Talk about that. You can hire and you can downsize, but that's not easy. It takes you 6 months or more to get someone on and ramped up. And certain companies, don't have the same flexibility that a mid-size or small business would be around organizational restructuring. Plus, it destroys your employer brand as you go through those cycles and you ramp up and ramp down. And so you have to get to a model where marketing has more. I can turn the dials of labor the same way I turn the dials on my program spend, the same way I turn the dials on my prioritization. And bringing this in, I think, solves a lot of those levers all at once.
Yeah, and on that point, I think that if you put your HR hat on within marketing, I know obviously as an agency owner, I'm monitoring the volume of applicants per role, the velocity at which I can hire as I need to as we win business, tying it to recurring revenue, but more importantly, a voluntary versus non-voluntary attrition. I think that if you as a CMO really look at those numbers, you'll recognize that when you have people leave your organization, it's that they thought that they were going to work on strategic, fun, really big, juicy projects, only to find themselves being very tactile, working within Marketo, setting up campaigns all day long. And they went, nobody told me I was going to be editing videos all day long. I just ended up in this role because I wasn't the CMO, and the CMO pushed all the work he or she didn't want to do downhill. That was a bit of a comment to your idea. The question I wanted to ask you is coming back to talent clusters. Started in Kuala Lumpur, now moved to the Philippines. A lot of times these talent clusters have, to your point, are used to certain working environments, whether that's customer facing versus non-customer facing, hours of operations, they call it day shift, mid shift, night shift. Where are some of the other talent clusters? And afterwards, I'll comment on why we chose Bangladesh, but where are some other talent clusters or markets you're thinking about building super centers and why?
Yeah. Some of that, I guess, is core to our secret sauce of growth. So maybe I'll beat around the bush on your question intentionally. I think there's some.
No, this is like I get your Form 10K right now.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's the benefit of being private. You can keep a lot of this. I think there's some really interesting markets in Latin America that are growing, that are really great talent hubs that have tremendous English proficiency and education platforms, and there's a couple really unique places that are not commonly used today that are the nearshore options that give you the time zone out of the gate, give you an easy place to visit, and so I think there's some real options there. I'm also a huge believer in Southeast Asia as a sort of cultural melting pot for lots of different backgrounds and diversity of thought and groups, a lot of creative skills, and also a lot of affinity to working in, U.S. markets for U.S. companies. And so those are my two favorite hubs, but I'll hold from the specific geographic conversation.
Yeah, I'll look for where you buy a beach house in Guanacaste, Costa Rica or something, and then try to figure it out. That's amazing. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about what does the best in class, if you were to give top customers of yours, what commonality, and this will be the last question before we roll out, what common thread are they doing specifically with that offshore talent that you provide? What is the big thread between them that I call, what does ideal look like?
Yeah, the thing that unifies the most successful organizations is that they're running marketing differently. They're not just taking work in the way it was structured and the processes they had and just shifting it to a lower cost geo. They're re-engineering the process, the workflow, the prioritization, the type of work. Sometimes that means putting it in a shared service center, pulling things out of different business units, taking them out of functional areas where you can create a center of excellence hub. So usually there's some type of operating model change at the same time as the geographic use of labor. And I think they're leaning into, in that world, now we can turn that labor into a utility and think about it in terms of unit cost economics. And you think about, we're really good as marketers at allocating our program budget to the things that we do. We spent this much ad budget on this campaign. We rent this event for this segment, but we don't really allocate our labor into what it does because a lot of it's spread on across a lot of different things. So you have the ability with this kind of model, the time tracking you get, the transparency, to really see where you're spending your scarce dollars that's being spent on humans, and then how do you orient that at the bigger priorities. I have 12 products to market. These 2 are the growth products. These 4 are maintained, and these are in decline. How do I make sure that the growth products get more attention? And so going through a sort of a labor orientation of that at the same time as you go through your strategy, and then putting the resources in a place where they can really deliver that work, that's the biggest change and most successful archetype if we have one.
This has been fantastic. Domenic, how do people get a hold of you, and what's next for you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Domenic Colasante. I won't spell it. It should be on the bottom, or 2x.marketing. What's next for us is we're building a big firm in this category. We have private equity support behind us now, a lot of momentum. This will be a 10,000 person firm in the next couple of years. And so that's what we're after.
That's amazing. Well, congrats. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Jamie. It's a pleasure to talk to you.